Hello and welcome to part 5 of 5 and the longest of these introduction videos. I hope you enjoy it. And I'm going to give you a heads up now. Not only is this a great video with Dan Freeman and me chatting away, but halfway between now and the live, a very special 2 minutes is coming out. A never to be repeated 2 minute special on HMS Africa is coming out. Never to be repeated. But I hope you enjoy it, and please remember, for more of this history content, please do subscribe, and please do press the bell. And I should probably add, this is one of my Patreon videos. This is Patreon number 8. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you're going to enjoy the live. These are the questions which the patrons have asked me to answer, and the patrons have voted for me to answer. So not only did the patrons suggest the questions, the patrons actually vote on which of those questions then get answered. So it's a very cool system. I enjoy it. I rather enjoy these. Take care.
Yeah.
And then they filter into the next ones. Article 17. A transfer not exceeding 10% of the allowed total tonnage of the category or subcategory into which the transfer is to be made shall be permitted between cruisers of subcategory B and destroyers.
Yep.
So you're basically able to turn 10% of your light cruiser category tonnage over to destroyers if you want to.
Or turn your heavy cruiser tonnage into light cruisers if you're the Royal Navy and want to maximise your light cruisers.
They have already agreed that that's the tonnage limit. But interesting enough, the United States, Article 18, actually explains the United States because it's the United States contemplates the completion by 1935 of 15 cruisers of subcategory A of an aggregate tonnage of 150,000 tons, 152,400 metric tons. For each of the 3 remaining cruisers of subcategory A, which it is entitled to construct, the United States may elect to substitute 15,166 tons, 15,409 tons, metric tons of cruisers of subcategory B. In the case the United States shall construct one or more of the remaining 3 remaining cruisers of subcategory A, the 16th unit will not be laid down before 1933 and will not be completed before 1936. The 17th will not be laid down before 1934, will not be completed before 1937. The 18th will not be laid down before 1935 and will not be completed before 1938. I.e., you are allowed, America, if you want to, you are allowed to shift your tonnage to light cruisers. But, and this might be my maths, that still doesn't mean you're going to get equivalent. You're going the extra 15,000 tons. You're going to get, broadly speaking, for doing that. That makes you just about equivalent to Britain, but for that you have to sacrifice those heavy cruisers, which you are so in love with.
They were. Their concept was that 6-inch cruisers and small cruisers less than 10,000 tons were of no use to them in the Pacific. And yes. I mean, I think that the experience of World War II proves them completely correct.
I would say it depends whether you treat your cruisers as small battleships or if you treat them as cruisers.
Yeah.
Because honestly, if I had my choice, 15,000 tons, that's 45,000 tons, so that's, let's say, 6 Leander class or 3 heavy cruisers.
I'll take the 6 Leanders, please.
Yeah. In fact, that's 6 slightly. A Leander class is technically only
6,000. Oh, I can't remember.
7 in metric tons. It's 7,386 or 7,270 imperial tons. So, honestly, I could get 6 Leander class vessels with an extra 200 tons built into them of whatever stuff I wanted. roughly, for that. In the nicest way, what I could get for 200 more tons on a Leander class, probably a little bit more armor plate, maybe a single treble turret, or a couple of treble turrets.
You see, I still think, and I think this is one of those things that I think goes back a very, very long way to one of the first pictures of a warship on one of the first books I ever had. This is childhood stuff. I still really like triple turrets, 2 forward, 1 aft, which Britain basically never built.
Huh?
They did later on with
Crown Colony class.
Yeah, they were originally designed with 4 turrets, and then they just realised that it was overweight and swapped it. Yes. Swapped X turret, but it just looks right to me as a sort of design somehow. As an aesthetic, and actually that's what the Americans were doing. And I do think that a Leander like that with 3 triples, it really it feels like it would have in some ways been a logical progression, and it would have given you the extra gun. You'd have shortened your overall length, albeit possibly needing a little bit more width.
So you'd have probably kept the length because that would keep your speed high.
Yeah. And yeah, just, it shortens your yeah. I mean, I could even understand if you wanted to stick 3 turrets forward and just leave aft for torpedoes, aircraft, and
always. I'd like having a turret to cover my stern.
It is good to have something so that if you meet something that you don't like, you can continue shooting whilst running away.
Yes, because whilst it might not offer much help, it does offer a lot of morale to still be able to shoot back.
It offers a combination of morale and makes the enemy pause for thought and think about where they are, what they're doing in terms of getting the perfect line on you.
Mm-hmm.
If they also have to be thinking about, there's 6-inch lumps of friendliness coming in my way.
It's always so friendly. It really wants to give you a nice warm embrace.
It does. I mean, it comes with everything it needs to start a nice little barbecue, so that all your crew can, be toasting marshmallows over the roaring fire that was B turret or something.
Yes. And this is where it leads into Article 19. Mm-hmm. Except as provided in Article 20, the tonnage laid down in any category subject to limitation in accordance with Article 16 shall not exceed the amount necessary to reach the maximum allowed tonnage of the category, or to replace vessels that become overage before the 31st December 1936. Nevertheless, replacement tonnage may be laid down for cruisers and submarines that become overage in 1937, 38, and 39, and for destroyers that become overage in 1937 and 38. Basically, they're really, really worried about people using old ships as a reason for building more ships.
Yes. It's this, I think we mentioned it last time, it's that they don't want people taking using this as an excuse to just scrap everything they've got and start with a blank slate with, 1930 technology, when actually rather than having all the legacy designs. That's the worry, because everyone's got a degree of legacy designs, for good or ill. Britain's still got a load of C-class cruisers and the Ds. The US have got their Omaha class, poor things. The Japanese have got some of their older things. Yeah. I mean, the Japanese are suddenly having to look at their it's the Megamis, isn't it, that suddenly have to go from having 5 twin turrets with 8-inch guns to 5 triple turrets with 6-inch guns, because the Japanese are stuck with their Furutaka, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there is somebody somewhere who actually speaks Japanese who is kind of screaming at us. But
I know several who probably are.
I'm also told that there's no swear words in Japanese, so they can't be swearing at us. So that's something.
That's rather disappointing if there are no swear words in Japanese. I thought there were, but perhaps not. Article 20, though, continues this on with, notwithstanding the rules of placement contained in Annex 1 to Part 2, A. The Frobisher and Effingham, United Kingdom, may be disposed of during the year 1936. Apart from the cruisers under construction on the 1st April 1930, total replacement tonnage of cruisers to be completed in the case of British Commonwealth of Nations prior to the 31st of December 1936 shall not exceed 91,000, that's 92,456 metric tons, 91,000 tons. B. Japan may replace the Tama by new construction to be completed during the year 1936. In addition to replacing destroyers becoming age before the 31st of December 1936, Japan may lay down, in each of the years 1935 and 1936, not more than 5,200 tons, that's 500,283 metric tons, to replace part of the vessels that become overage in 1938 and 39. D. Japan may anticipate replacement during the term of the present treaty by laying down not more than 19,200 tons or 19,507 metric tons of submarine tonnage, of which not more than 12,000 tons, that's 12,192 metric tons, shall be completed by the 31st of December 1936. It's fun in so many ways.
It's another case of what were the Japanese thinking agreeing to this? You know, somebody has got a get out with two of their cruisers that they want to replace because they've recognized that they're overweight for what they're now looking for and undergunned, because these are the, I've heard so many different terms for them, Elizabethan class, Hawkins class.
Hawkins class is usually what I go with.
Yeah, I quite like the Elizabethan class.
Again, there are so many exceptions being worked into this. One has to wonder what and again, as I said, really once you go through this, and there is always a part when you can be accused of being overly patriotic or something when you say that you think Britain managed to get the best deal out of this treaty going. But that's not really a good thing. But sort of that's saying that Britain was the least one which had the least tamping down in some respects on its ambitions. When you look at the other navies, what they're getting, you sort of go, why are they agreeing to this? To an extent, you can understand. See, there's a clear line of why the Royal Navy is agreeing to what it's doing. You can see there's a clear line to an extent. The U.S. Navy's obsession with heavy cruisers. Why the Royal Navy's managing to get the light cruiser line it wants?
Yeah, they're offering the compromise, and the Americans are getting pretty close. I think they'd originally wanted 21 heavy cruisers.
Yes.
And now they're going, well, you can have 18 and lots and lots of light cruisers. So, we know that you don't think, and that's what kept the lighter cruiser class at 10,000 tons.
It kept all the cruisers at 10,000 tons.
Yeah.
Remember, all the cruisers limited at 10,000 tons, but it keeps.
Yeah.
The reason the Royal Navy's light cruisers are so much lower than that is because the Royal Navy's trying to build numbers up.
Yeah. Whereas the US thinks that 10,000 tons is the lowest figure that they'll accept. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that the current Wikipedia page on the May 15 incident has an unattributed, and it needs sourcing, and people have noticed it needs sourcing, but at the moment, when I'm looking at it, at least, it may be edited in due course, of course, is directly linking the assassination of the Japanese Prime Minister that leads to kind of the rise of, or the fall of democratic government there, to this treaty and the sense of Japan just being done over.
And there's part of me which wonders if the Japanese politicians were trying to use this treaty to try and get control of defense spending because of the effect it was having on their economy. They were hoping to be able to use international pressure and the fact that this is signed in the Emperor's name to try and get it through.
Yeah, but actually it was a gamble that sadly didn't work, because the more I read about the Japan kind of leading up to 1930, the more actually I quite like them. They were broadly on the trajectory to become, I suppose, similar to what they are now.
Broadly speaking.
But without things like needing firebombings of Tokyo and the creation of many artificial reefs and lots of war crimes.
So many artificial reefs. Anyway, Article 21. If during the term of the present treaty the requirements of the national security of any high contracting party in respect of vessels of war limited by Part 3 of the present treaty are, in the opinion of that party, materially affected by new construction of any power other than those who have joined the Part 3 of this treaty, that high contracting party will notify the other parties to Part 3 as to an increase required to be made in its own tonnages, within one or more of the categories of such vessels of war, specifying particularly the proposed increases and the reasons therefor, and shall be entitled to make such increase. Thereupon, the other parties to Part 3 of this treaty shall be entitled to make a proportionate increase in the category or categories specified, and the said other parties shall promptly advise of each other through diplomatic channels as to the situation thus presented.
This is the France and Italy. You might not be signing up to this, but if you go too rogue, we will come and beat you down by outbuilding you.
Yes, I don't think it's just France and Italy, though.
No, it's anyone and everyone, and there's obviously the Deutschland class which have started building and been ordered.
Yeah, it's going to sound strange. Germany isn't so much on the radar at this precise time. They are coming there, but they're not on there just yet. The ones who are really on the radar, I think they're worrying about, are Russia, because at this point you have got Stalin going around talking about building a massive fleet. Stalin's always mouthing off about building a massive fleet at certain points, but it is going there. And specifically, this was added in because the Japanese were worried about it, and the Brits were also sort of, to an extent, worried about it, but not so worried about it. And these things about other nations building up, they're not so much the worry of America and Britain, because America and Britain are the largest powers. But this is an agreement in there to try and make it easier for Japan to be able to go home and go, well, if Russia does start building up a large Pacific fleet again, and you go, we need to build more, then you have a reason for it.
Yeah. It helps a lot of people, and the problem is that the next treaty, the 36th treaty, is basically only like Article 21, it feels like, and there's nothing else good in it.
Yes.
That one's rubbish. This one, I think, does good things. Whether people want, and I know that the Japanese clearly did not like it. Or at least,
well, a strong element of them didn't like it.
Yeah, a strong element of the Japanese did not like it, but actually I think it helped their economy that they were restricted. But at the same time, it was a treaty that people made, and although towards the end of its term, people had kind of, especially the Japanese, had started giving up on it a bit, and were just kind of flagrantly lying about displacements and things and what have you. But for a good few years, it actually held, and people seem to have stuck to it.
Yes.
And they at least thought before breaking it. And that's quite impressive for something like this, to actually put us, that you had Washington in kind of 22, 23, and then a full 8 years later, give or take, a good chunk of time later, you've got a continuation of that kind of thinking being accepted and acceptable.
But what I find interesting is they do put in the end line of 1936, and really we can stop the discussion with Article 22, which is where we probably will stop it, because the rest of the articles are mostly, if you go and read them, about the timing, so we'll turn into it, go into sort of more general discussion. But I want to get into Article 22 because it's part of the whole Royal Navy's and Britain's sphere of submarines. Article 22, the following are accepted as established rules of international law. 1. In their action with regard to merchant ships, submarines must conform to the rules of international law to which surface vessels are subject. 2. In particular, except in the case of persistent refusal to stop on being duly summoned or of active resistance to visit or search, a warship, whether surface vessel or submarine, may not sink or render incapable of navigation a merchant vessel without having first placed passengers, crew, and ship's papers in a place of safety. For this purpose, the ship's boats are not regarded as a place of safety unless the safety of the passengers and crews is assured in existing sea and weather conditions by the proximity of land or the presence of another vessel which is in position to take them on board. The high contracting parties invite all other powers to express their assent to the above rules.
And then part of Article 23 is the next little bit. Part 4, so this is Article 22, shall remain in force without limit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And was adopted by the League of Nations, I think, or certainly registered, and still is true to this day, I think. It's still part of international.
It's been folded into other things.
Yeah, but it still stands. And it was it's very interesting. The submarines thing. They are small little gun. They are still at this stage very much small little gunboats. They are, in terms of size, they are maybe getting on for the same size as the contemporary destroyers of the time, which are themselves pretty titchy when you compare them to modern warships. These are not huge things. And the threat of the kind of unrestricted submarine warfare that happened in World War One was really quite shocking, I think, to everyone, because until that point, you didn't really sink merchant ships. You captured them. You put prize crews aboard them. But you weren't reducing the total number of ships. And you would, I don't want to say that you wouldn't that wouldn't threaten unpleasant things, because going back all the way to ancient Rome, the sort of, you could starve people. Italy, Rome in particular, was dependent on grain imported from North Africa, and particularly Egypt. And so control of that, the kind of the Mediterranean and the fleet that would carry that across each year, was one of the ways in which the emperor would have power. So it's not that people don't threaten to do nasty things, but you wouldn't threaten to sink that whole fleet of ships. You just
it's worth too much money.
Yeah. So to suddenly have people going around sinking them all the time is really shocking. And it's just
it's not what you do, because also you have to remember that up to this point, maritime wars had largely been waged by maritime nations. Which, it sounds strange to say when we talk about the Napoleonic Wars and France, etc., and these things. But France is a land power to an extent, but they need the merchant ships because of the infrastructure in the Napoleonic period. You still need merchant ships. They are the big way of moving stuff around.
Yeah.
They might have to go a long way to get around there, but it is a lot better than, the land option. What you're dealing with once you get to, there hasn't been a major war really what you would call a major war from the Napoleonic period onwards to the First World War, primarily. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about a global war. I'm not talking about a major war as it has to be between European powers. I'm talking about a war where there are fleets engaging across the world and all the oceans and those sort of things.
Yeah.
It's different. It's complicated. And when you've got anti-submarine warfare coming into it and submarines emerging, and to start off with, the submarines are starting to try and use prize rules, but they can't use prize rules. The reason they can't do is they don't have space for a prize crew aboard, and where's that ship going to go?
Yeah.
For it to be interred as a prize. So their only option is to sink.
Yeah. I mean, the Central Powers in the First World War don't have an Atlantic coast.
No.
They just don't. Time for a Spitfire.
Yeah.
If any of these breweries would like to sponsor, I know you don't drink, and really, have Irn-Bru not been in touch yet about sponsorship?
Sadly enough, no.
But you're doing massive things for their sales because lots of people are going out and trying it.
Yeah, but apparently no.
I mean, I won't try it, but that is because I don't like really any of those sorts of fizzy drinks. He says, pouring a nice, probably a bit too much head. I don't drink Coke, any of the sort of colas, unless they've got enough vodka in them.
That happens, but no, it's these treaties. I often consider, what I find interesting is that the naval treaties managed to work. The air power limitation, the treaties to try and limit air power, really don't.
And land power. I mean, there was I think it's the most gloriously sort of somewhere between 1930s, or I see it in something like a cartoon from my youth, the World Disarmament Conference. I mean, it just sounds like something that is going to be hijacked by a supervillain, maybe the Joker or somebody. Does it not sound, or it's going to have to be rescued by Superman? I mean, it's so 1930s. Yes. It's just wonderful. But they were started working on it in 1925, kind of doing the background work. It went on to 1934, and it achieved
nothing.
There was no outcome, really. It was the thing which I think Hitler stormed out of. It was, I think that quite a few people found it useful for sort of walking out of it and making points, but there was no treaty that came out of it. And I think that was kind of looking at land powers. That was, I think, an attempt at everything. That was trying to build on the success of the naval treaties. And
it's interesting to note this conference was chaired by the former British Foreign Secretary Arthur Henderson, who of course was involved in naval treaties. And the whole idea is that everyone disarms, but the negotiations, immediately Germany asked for military equality, or she would leave. Well, in nicest way, you're asking for military equality when the whole point is you're supposed to be everyone's disarming.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah, and I mean, I in that sense, the 1930 treaty is the. I don't want to say it's the high point, because actually, in a lot of ways, I think the Washington Treaty is the high point. I think it is the last.
I think it's the last tangible success in the interwar period. And I think the interesting thing is the whole debate with the war, the conference, the Disarmament Conference, comes down to a debate over what is an offensive and what is a defensive weapon. And the trouble is, if you're Britain and you're talking about its global maritime empire, a cruiser is a defensive weapon. But if you're Germany and you're talking about it and your worry is you're going to get blockaded, the cruisers are an offensive weapon that the Britain will use.
Yep.
And that's, I think, the real problem at the time coming on is the fact that there is no longer, I don't think there ever has been weapons which are purely defensive, purely offensive. Maybe you can claim a fort which you can dig in your thing and put guns on it. That's a purely defensive thing because it cannot move. So that's purely about defending that area. But also that depends on how big a gun you fit it with and how long a range that's capable of. Because if it's like the guns which you could fit in which Britain and Germany fitted in France, which could shell each other across the channel, that's hardly defensive.
And there's also that having a strong fixed defense like that actually just frees up more of your forces to go on the offensive. You know, the threat of a castle when you invade someone is not the castle. It is if you don't reduce that castle and get it out of the way, it is going to be a thorn in your side because once you've moved on, because you're, I don't know, driving on London or something, you know, coming up from, you know, you've landed in Kent, you're driving on London, the panzers are unleashed going up the Weald or something. If you haven't taken Dover Castle, then what's going to happen is a few thousand people, a few thousand soldiers are going to come out of Dover Castle and play merry hell in your rear areas.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not. And it's taken me a really, really long time to get this idea.
Yes.
And it's actually been true since the very beginning of castles. They are actually kind of an offensive thing because also they mean that you can leave a relatively small garrison to hold an area and send everyone else off to fight, and you can keep safe. So actually, they are an enabler, and they allow you to garrison places.
Which is why, as I said, I think in the first part, as we discussed about this, infrastructure matters for an economy. Infrastructure also matters for defense. If you consider if the infrastructure that could have been built was built in Singapore that should have been built in the 1930s or even in sort of 1930s that should have been built for its defense being built, i.e. a nice ring road, some pillboxes on various beaches, some more better dug-in gun positions that mobile artillery could move to. Maybe some more of those guns have some high explosives, so they're not just armor-piercing. And maybe have some fuel air explosive shells as well, so you can burn the jungles.
Yep, always good to be able to do that kind of thing.
It's not nice. It would destroy the Malayan economy for a good while. But if your choice is to destroy the Malayan economy for a few years, or or lose Singapore,
you're only going to burn a band within the range of your guns, which is going to be.
Well, no, the fires will probably go until the rain puts them out, but I'll leave that to one side.
Depends when somebody decides to attack, but you know.
Let's be honest here. If you're doing it, you're going to launch a lot of fire at someone.
Yeah.
And some fewer explosive shells from 15-inch guns would have that impact.
They would have an impact. They have an impact on most things.
Yeah. It's like if they had high explosive, they'd have had an impact.
Or if somebody just remembered to, garrison the dug-in positions around the water supply.
Yeah, that would have had a massive impact.
Because, this is why you need to keep good soldiers everywhere.
Yes. Or at least people with common sense. What do we need to live? Water. Do we have any troops at the reservoir? No. Why not?
Yeah. Who can go and sit at the reservoir?
You can.
You can. What's that? You're Gurkhas and incredibly tough and vicious fighters? Good. And you're the Highlanders. Excellent. Not going to be too upset about that. And some Royal Marines. Perfect.
Go, sit, reservoir now.
Go, sit, have fun, top can.
Anyone shows up, give them a nice, friendly welcome.
Yes. You can have a competition to see who can collect the most ears or noses or something.
That never, of course, officially happened.
No.
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 Some of the stories. You get some really strange things happen in World Wars. But no, the treaties weren't...
There was an Egyptian pharaoh who did it with penises.
Okay, and that's just made us X-rated.
Sorry. Feel free to edit.
There are so many things which do have, and of course, Dan is a medical doctor, so he's very used to talking about these things. I've spent a large part of my life with hanging out for Royal Marines. That makes me used to talking about these things quite a lot. I would have to say, there's no real place to go from there, but I'm going to try and find somewhere that,
You're very welcome to edit that bit out.
I'll leave it in. It's more fun too. The war, the whole thing is, I find it interesting. This one is scheduled to go on to 1936, this treaty. And it's almost as if they realize that their time is running out.
Yeah.
And the 1936 treaty, let's be honest, is pretty much ignored from the get-go by everyone.
Yes, the only thing that irritates me about the 36 treaty is they actually bothered signing it.
It's not even worth the paper it's written on.
No.
It really isn't.
And it
has so many escalator clauses and things in it.
And it was even just the build-up to it nerfed the KGV's guns.
Yeah. Otherwise, they'd have had 3 treble 15-inch turrets.
And we would all have been very, very happy.
We would have been so happy. I mean, seriously. All guns standardizing on 15-inch shells.
Yeah.
Logistics.
Just everything. And also not having to try and come up with quad turrets, which just...
Yeah.
I mean, given that they couldn't get the triple turrets to work in the Nelson class for about 5 years.
Yet they got them working. Yes, they were treble 16, so maybe they did KGVs would be treble 16s, like the Nelsons, but with one out the rear, one rear, 2-4. Yeah. Or they'd have been treble 15s. Either way, you've got a working treble turret design that you've ironed out the issues of to base your things from.
And the main problem was they were saving weight, and so I think, and they made some of the compromises they made were in the wrong places, so some bits were too weak for the weight they were carrying and things, rather than because they'd originally designed for the G3, N3 designs, which are obviously not going to be limited, so they could be heavier, and they were kind of going, well, we don't want to reduce the armor, so let's see which bits of gubbins we can pull out. And they kind of pulled out a few too many bits of gubbins and replaced them with lighter metals and things.
Yeah, it's just not a good idea. Sometimes treaties lead to compromises.
I think the point about the treaties is they are supposed to lead to compromises, so no one walks away happy, but nobody walks away too angry.
Well, the trouble is they often lead to design compromises, which means no one walks away safe either.
Yeah.
All sensible. It's an interesting thing, but honestly, what I find interesting about this is an era where we all talk about aircraft carriers and naval aviation starting to come ahead. And really, that's the Washington Treaty. Naval aviation has its limitations. But these treaties don't talk. carriers aren't. It's reiterating the Washington Treaty. It's not really evolving the Washington Treaty.
So at around this time, I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I think there must have been about 16 aircraft carriers in service on the entire planet.
And a large chunk of those were Royal Navy.
Yeah. Royal Navy had about 5. The Americans had 2.
No. Courageous, Glorious, Furious.
Yeah.
Hermes, Eagle, Argus.
Yeah.
Plus they had Albatross, the seaplane carrier.
Yep. The Americans have got 2.
Yeah.
Japanese have got 2 and 1 building? 3.
Yeah.
3 and 1 building, which is the Tichy one. And the French have...
Burn.
And they've got the seaplane carrier Commandant Teste.
Yeah.
And the Italians have got a seaplane carrier whose name I can't remember. Because it gets exempt, doesn't it? Oh, I did write it down somewhere. And then I can really mangle my Italian and show that...
But what we're getting at is that carriers aren't seen... And it's not just by anyone, it's everyone sort of not really talking about the aircraft carrier thing. And I think there's a reason for this. It's not because they're not seen as being a threat that's coming or a weapon system that's evolving. It's because no one's quite sure what they're going to involve them into yet. So they'd rather like everyone to not look at them so that they are free to develop them. Because the more people look at them, as is happening with cruisers and destroyers in this treaty and all sorts of other things, the more likely there are to be limitations.
And different people are going in different directions with it. So the Americans, I think it's around this time the Americans really discovered dive bombing.
Yes.
Which does interesting things to their thought processes. The Japanese, I think, are coming to similar conclusions, but you've had, by this point, so by 1930, you've had 12, 13 years of aircraft which can carry a torpedo.
Mm-hmm. Britain's on something in the region of its 3rd, possibly its 4th generation of torpedo bomber.
Yep. And
or at least type, if you don't want to call them generations, types, because they are literally, one is just a evolution of the previous one, or a slight evolution of the previous one, slight evolution of the previous one.
Yeah, things are...
1930 is the year the Swordfish is specified for. It's specified.
Yes. And
first.
You also have the Japanese building the... Oh, crud, I did look at this up. The Japanese are building the... Sorry. I make lots of lovely notes. They are at least pretty, but...
Mm-hmm.
Beer doesn't help me with remembering what I was thinking. What were the Japanese building? So they were looking at the Mitsubishi B2M1.
Yes.
At around this sort of time, which is, and the reason for mentioning it is, what's it based on?
Blackburn's designs.
Yes, which means it has the DNA of
the swordfishing, technically via the shark.
Yeah. But also the Blackburn.
Yes,
hallowed be thy fugly biplane design.
Oh,
I don't understand the obsession with it.
Swordfish,
totally. Swordfish, wonderful. I am still campaigning that the Royal Navy just needs to get the production line back up and running and just get those things back. And I don't necessarily feel
there are about 2 flying and 1 privately owned flying in the world at the moment, free Swordfish. So we could probably have them taking off a Queen Elizabeth class.
Yep. And all I want to do is update the electronics. Now
you're going to shock quite a lot of listeners. Yes, they do have electronics in them. Yeah. much in the way of electrics, but a little bit.
Quite early on, they were carrying radar.
Yes, and beacon receivers.
Yeah, but also just generally they were doing sea search. They were carrying sea search radars off Malta during the siege of Malta and things.
They were carrying search radar. It's one of the reasons why you find swordfish keep turning up on ships even long after they're supposedly out of frontline carrier service. And you go, this is a frontline carrier. It's got swordfish on it. Why? It's carrying they're carrying its radars.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And this is the era when submarines stay on the surface, so you can detect them with radar. It's not just a little tiny periscope going beep, 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 like something cute, like R2-D2 in the sandstorm. It's the whole ship boat.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why the treaties are like they are, and why the treaties are treating submarines the way they do, why they treat aircraft, because of the realities in the context of time. Anyway, I think I have taken up enough of Dan's time, and I've got a lot of editing to do. So I will say thank you very much to Dan for being here, and we will finish this, and there will be a live, which will these videos will come up beforehand, which hopefully everyone will enjoy.
Yes, and I will make sure I'm there in the chat.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed part 5 of 5 of me and Dan Friedman. And I hope you join us for the live. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you as ever to all my subscribers, to everyone who's liked the videos, who's pressed the little bell, and to everyone who's my patrons. It's always really nice of you all. And thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed and hope to see you live. Thank you. Take care.